Welcome to Animal Physiology. I hope you find this class enjoyable, engaging, and informative. Physiology is a very complex topic, so this class is going to be difficult. It's going to go over a lot of very complex situations and very detail-oriented about how the animal body works. But I hope by the end you will have a very clear understanding of just how the animal body functions and how it survives. First, a little bit about me. My name is Michelle Kovalevsky. You may address me as Michelle in your emails. And I am adjunct at Santa Barbara City College, and I've been there since 2015. And I have a lot of outside hobbies when I'm not teaching at City College. First, I have a family. You'll see my children make an appearance in some of the pictures throughout these lectures. We are an active family. We love to get outside and explore and ski and do different activities. So that's one of my hats, my mom hat. My other hat, you can see down here, my husband and I really enjoy live music, and we travel as much as we can to go see different music at different venues. Up here on the top right is my other career, my hat as a nonprofit executive director. And my nonprofit studies the health of whales and dolphins that have died and end up on a beach. And this health of them, they're already dead, so they're not always healthy, but it's telling us a lot about the health of the ocean. My nonprofit is called Sea Crew, Channel Islands Cetacean Research Unit, and we are actively conducting research up and down the coast on the beaches as animals pass. And finally, my other little loves, my dogs. I love to take them out. They will also make some appearances in these videos. And on my time off, I enjoy taking them for runs or walks, whatever they enjoy. Let's start off by defining physiology. Physiology is the study of function and how animals work. It's also the sum of all of the bodily processes. All of those bodily processes make up the metabolism, and this is what helps keep them alive in their natural environment. As we go throughout the semester, you will notice that we're going to talk about each of the different organ systems and how they function physiologically, and we'll also talk a little bit about their anatomy. But one thing you need to keep in mind as we go throughout the semester is that none of these organ systems work independently. While we are learning about them independently, they're all working together to keep an animal alive in many different situations. We'll talk about animals at the highest altitudes, at the deepest sea, at the coldest temperatures, at the hottest temperatures, and everything in between. And all of their different organ systems need to be adapted for this. So when we refer to animal physiology, we're referring to the scientific study of life-supporting properties, functions, and processes of animals and of their parts. And again, all of these are working together to keep the animal alive. That's one thing I want you to think about when you're answering questions or when you're going through exams or things like that is how are all of these different systems contributing to the life of this animal? Physiology also covers key homeostatic processes that are keeping the animal in balance in their environment. This is things like regulation of temperature, regulation of blood flow, hormones. Think that some animals hibernate, some animals will survive many extremes like freezing. And so all of these different factors contribute to the physiology of that animal. And physiology is a very integrative discipline. It's using all aspects of biology. It's one of the most integrative disciplines there are. It's using evolution, and we'll talk about each organ system and how it has evolved in the different animals. Ecology is critically important because how an animal interacts with its environment is very important. And the environment itself. The environment is going to dictate how the animals physiology is adapted. As we've mentioned, animals live in a wide variety of environments, and they must be able to carry out all of their normal functions in these environments. They must be able to survive, eat, mate, reproduce, and maybe even socialize in these environments. And adaptations will allow for the animal to be able to do that. One thing you might hear me say throughout the semester is that the whole end game, the whole goal in biology is to pass on your genetic material to the next generation. This is how you make yourself count. This is how you make yourself a productive part of your population. So if the end game, the end goal of living is to pass on your DNA to the next generation, you need to be able to survive long enough to do that. You also need to ensure that either your individual offspring survive, or you have to have enough offspring to make sure that at least a few survive. So it's a struggle out there in the wild world, and we're going to talk about that. Animals need to be adapted to survive these different conditions. And adaptations are modifications of the characteristics of organisms that facilitate an enhanced ability to survive and reproduce. Let's talk about what adaptations need to do for animals. Adaptations need to preserve structural integrity. Remember that animals live at different temperatures, they live at different pressures. Depending if they live in saltwater, freshwater, or on land, there might be different osmotic factors at play. All of their cells, their cell membranes, the organelles in their cells, all of these need to be able to withstand these different pressures, temperatures, and osmotic balances. Adaptations also need to provide adequate supplies. They need to provide enough energy to support the functions of their animals in their environments. And finally, adaptations also need to support the regulation of their metabolic rate. Non-regulation can be very wasteful or not adequate enough, and the animal would die from lack of food or nutrition or water or whatever is using up all of their metabolic needs. There are 3 ways that animals can adapt. They can adapt genetically. This is where there are long-term changes made by mutations in regulatory genes. Animals can acclimate, and this is where they already have the genes. They just need to turn off certain genes or turn on certain genes to help them better acclimate to their environment. And they can also modify pre-existing enzymes. We'll talk about enzymes in a little bit, and modify these to work under different conditions, and that can be an immediate adaptation. And really, time is the deciding factor in all of these. Water is a molecule that is essential for life, and we're going to talk about it a lot this semester because it's really important in the animal's body. Animals are about 70% water, so we can't talk about physiology without really understanding water and why it's so important. Let's first look at the structure of a water molecule. A water molecule is made up of 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogen ions. And this is important because that oxygen is larger than those 2 hydrogens, and it has more electronegativity. It has more pull. Therefore, when the water molecule is stuck together with that oxygen and those 2 hydrogen ions, it remains slightly polar or slightly charged. And you can see this here. This oxygen molecule is going to have a negative charge even when it's together with its hydrogen ions. So it's going to stay slightly negative. The hydrogen ions, as you can see here, are going to remain slightly positive. And because of this, it gives water some very unique properties. The fact that that oxygen is slightly negative and those hydrogen ions are slightly positive is called polar. It remains polar. And this polarity of the water molecule is going to give it, again, its unique properties. Between each water molecule is something called a hydrogen bond. And these hydrogen bonds are what help hold water together. Between the two water molecules that you can see here is a hydrogen bond. We have polar covalent bonds holding together the actual water molecule. So the two hydrogen ions and the oxygen are held together by a polar covalent bond. But between the slightly negativity of the oxygen from one water molecule and the slight positivity of the hydrogen ions from another water molecule, we end up with something called a hydrogen bond. And this also helps give water its unique properties. The hydrogen bond is only there because of the polarity of the water molecule. Again, those hydrogen bonds are holding the water molecules together through the attraction of that slightly negative oxygen and the slightly positive hydrogens. The polarity of the water molecules is also giving it cohesive tension. It's allowing those water molecules to stick together. And again, it's those hydrogen bonds that are sticking these water molecules together, causing this cohesive tension. Think about when you're driving in your car and you have little water droplets on your windshield. And as you drive and the wind is pushing those water molecules together, once they get close enough, they stick together. And that is cohesive tension. Cohesive tension is also what allows water striders to stand on top of water. The polarity of water molecules also gives it a lot of thermoresiliency. It takes a lot of heat to heat water up, and water also holds heat for a long time, even when it's cold. It's very temperature stable. And this is because you need to break all of those hydrogen bonds to get the water molecules moving. We'll talk about temperature a bit. Temperature is the movement of molecules. When molecules are moving much faster, you have more temperature, more heat, more energy. When molecules are moving slower, this is because there's less energy or less heat. In order to get water molecules moving, you need to break all of those hydrogen bonds to let those molecules move. When you have a lot of water molecules, you have a lot of hydrogen bonds. So it takes a lot of heat or a lot of energy input to heat that up and get them moving. The hydrogen bonds in ice are very stable. So think about if you're in a very crowded room and everyone's moving and it's very hot and stuffy in there. And think about if it was very cold and all of you kind of spaced out with your arms outstretched, and that's how far apart you are. Water would be if everyone's in a room moving with a lot of temperature. Ice would be when everyone is stretched out with their arms stretched out and they are equally distant apart. So ice forms when water freezes, and this stabilizes those hydrogen bonds in these patterns here that you can see, and that separates those water molecules. And this is what allows ice to float. Ice is very interesting because ice is the solid form of water. Usually, the solid form of a liquid would be more dense. It would sink in a liquid. But ice, because of the way those hydrogen bonds stabilize each of those molecules far apart, it floats. It's less dense. So ice is the one time where a substance is less dense in its solid form. And this is why ice floats. Lastly, we'll talk about water as an excellent solvent. It's an excellent solvent because the polarity of the water molecules can bind to other elements or molecules. Therefore, the slight positivity of the hydrogen ions can bond to negative ions. The slight negativity of the oxygen ions can bond to positive ions. So in this situation here, we have salt water. Water is surrounding all of those salts. The salts are the solutes. The water is the solvent. And the water molecules, because they are polar, can separate those sodium and chloride ions and help them dissolve in the water. Therefore, it is an excellent solvent. Again, this is because of the polarity of that water molecule. We will talk about the importance of water throughout this semester. It makes up anywhere from 60 to 90% of the animal, depending on what the animal is. Usually you see 70% as just an average. But it's going to transport nutrients, oxygen, gases, waste products all throughout the body in the blood of the animal. It is also going to make up the fluid inside the cell. It will also help animals maintain temperature stability. It'll help keep animals at a stable temperature, which is very important for metabolism that we just spoke of. Water also provides a medium for chemical reactions to happen in the body. Chemical reactions are happening constantly throughout the body. In chemical reactions, you have reactants forming products. The reactants are the substances at the beginning of the reaction, and the products are the substances formed at the end of the reaction. If the reactants are smaller molecules than the product, energy is consumed in this reaction, and this is an endergonic reaction, meaning that it requires energy input. If the reactants are larger molecules than the product, energy will be released when those bonds are broken, and this is called an exergonic reaction because energy is being released from it. We will talk about this more when we talk about cellular respiration. In the body of animals, glucose is consumed to make energy in the body, and that's an example of an exergonic reaction. An example of an endergonic reaction, which we will not talk about, is photosynthesis, because you have small molecules like water and carbon dioxide, which are put together to make glucose for a plant.